Hello, Rena.
Hello, Dr. Bach.
So, welcome everyone to a free association conversation between Rena K and myself, Dr. Bach Ho. We're both organic intelligence coaches. We help people reduce suffering and increase capacity to handle more in life with ease using the protocols of organic intelligence. In these live stream free association conversations, Rena and I try to aim both at people who are completely new to organic intelligence and people who already know its basics. We try to find the balance. Today, our topic is what is inhibition and when is it good? Since we're doing free association conversation where nothing is planned, I feel like starting with this. You and I meet about 15 minutes early before the live stream starts, and I was in a bad mood. And I think in the background, I'm still a little bit in a bad mood. And during our pre-live stream time, I was wondering, actually, I was wondering even before we saw each other, like, am I going to tell Rena about my bad mood or inhibit or not do that? And should I do it or not? Maybe I'll decide in the moment. And I did end up sharing that I'm in a bad mood. And then we're live stream now, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. And then maybe I'll continue. I also thought, okay, maybe I won't tell her I'm in a bad mood before live stream, and I'll just wait until half an hour after when we do our post live stream, just kind of debrief, and I'll tell her then. So there's a real example in the moment in my life of, do I inhibit or not? Okay, so I'll just start with that. Now, actually, when I use the word inhibit just now in my example of do I not do I what I want to do is talk about my bad mood to run it. Do I inhibit it or not? The word inhibit there meant, do I hold back what I want to do or not? Not do what I want, not do what I want to do or not. That meaning of inhibit, sorry for this transition, half sorry, is actually not the meaning of inhibition much of the time in organic intelligence. So my beginning anecdote wasn't exactly straight into organic intelligence. Now to organic intelligence, inhibition in the context of organic intelligence is inhibition of intensity primarily. It may also be used to refer to not doing what you really want to do, but right now it primarily is referring to inhibiting intensity. For example, you start feeling excited and it's unpleasant, or you start feeling stressed, arousal, heart rate increase, and it's uncomfortable. So you uh, pick on like one of a zillion self care things that you know. Like you're going to do some deep breathing. Let's say focused on the exhales. I'm going to do some deep breathing, focusing on my exhales to lower my heart rate, which is making me uncomfortable, or my activation. So that would be inhibition of intensity. You're inhibiting. All right. Now, when is it good to inhibit your intensity, and when is it not good to inhibit your intensity? I feel like I'm going on for a while, but I'll stop in a moment. So, from an organic intelligence perspective, the rule of thumb is it's good to inhibit your intensity when it's too high. What does it mean for it to be too high? When the level of your intensity is over that precise point called an organic intensity threshold. When it's over that point, it's a good rule of thumb to inhibit, because it's at that organic intensity threshold that if you can reach that level and not exceed it and rest from it, then you'll grow capacity, you'll grow biological capacity to process more information and intensity automatically and easily. That was an abstract answer. How do you know when you're over threshold? Not, I mean, we'll get into that maybe, but I'm giving you just a bare bones abstract answer first. So it's good to inhibit when intensity is too high, and too high means over the organic intensity threshold, with I know questions about, well, how do I know when I'm over threshold? But we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good when when is inhibition of intensity not good? Here's a rule of thumb. When your intensity level needs to go higher, when it needs to go higher, then trying to inhibit like deep breathing or jogging or punch a pillow or whatever may be not indicated. When does it need to go higher? Sometimes it needs to go higher to reach the organic intensity threshold. So you don't want to do your deep breathing or forced orientation, look at the objects, hear what's around you to down regulate or to lower intensity because it needs to go higher to reach organic intensity threshold. Or sometimes it just needs to go higher, even if it's going to take you over threshold. And even if you are over threshold, I'm sorry if I'm being so verbose and all over the place, but actually I feel like I'm quite organized. So it may be that you're already over threshold, but you need to go even more. You need to cry, let's say. You need to cry to feel better. Whether the crying would involve going over threshold or hitting the exact threshold, you need to cry, but you're going to try to, rigidify your muscles and play a game on your iPhone to not cry, and you're just going to inhibit, but it's just not going to work this time. You have to accelerate. You cannot inhibit. Rena?
Yeah, it's couple thoughts that come to mind, and maybe we'll just give a little bit, given what you said here, maybe a little caveat is in order. And one of those caveats is around this organic intensity threshold you talk about, that whether we are inhibiting or too much or too little in relation to that, that's probably not something most of us can very accurately attend to in ourselves. Like that's one of the reasons to have like an organic intelligence coach. You, me, others who've been trained to be able to watch what's happening in the biology while you, as a client, completely disinhibit. Like what we want with clients is actually to not be tracking like an observer outside themselves and tracking what they're saying. We want people to just free associate in their conversation. That's kind of why we talk about that. So that the coach is watching, oh, where is this in terms of the potential threshold? And I think the other thing I was going to say with that is that we tend to have habits or tendencies. So some of us have a tendency to more likely be adding inhibitory impulses into our system. So we're more likely to avoid any kind of upset, and we'll do all kinds of things to just never have any uncomfortable feelings, including positive intense feelings, right? So there's lots of people who struggle with feeling a whole lot of pleasure, and that's hard. It's because there's so much inhibition on the system. Likewise, there can be people who have a tendency to very often go over threshold. There's not a lot of inhibitory impulses in their system. And in those cases, lives look much more chaotic just in general. And so there'll be, there's a lot of upsetness. That upsetness is really easy. It's almost like somebody might say, "Oh, my emotions. I have a hair trigger. Like it doesn't take much for me to be emotionally like kind of lost it, right?" And
Mm.
so some people have more of that tendency. And so part of what the coach is doing is for people who have too little inhibition, and so they're going to go over their organic threshold. And again, you can't really always do this yourself. The coach is going to add a little bit of inhibitory signals into your system so that you don't go over that threshold. And the opposite, and you already mentioned this, is that if a system needs to do a little bit more, like it really needs to cry to be able to hit that threshold so that it can come back down again and we can get the oscillations going, well,
Mm.
then that's, the coach is actually going to help support that level of intensity bumping up. So, um, it's as I was listening to you, I'm like, wow, that sounds really complex. All right. In some ways it's not, but it sounds complex to a person if they think that they have to do this for themselves. If you think you have to do this for
Yeah.
yourself, so you're going to get in trouble in that way.
I mm, I thank you for your caveat I had that in mind in my notes, and it escaped my mind as I opened with what I opened with. So thank you for the caveat. I want to run with it again, and I want to go with it and say how I opened in this live stream talking about the organic intensity threshold. It may be that my opening was more or less pointless and useless for most people in real life. So I just want to flag that. I think that what I was talking about in my opening is more apt for organic intelligence coaches in session when we're actually tracking a person's biology and trying to suss out thresholds, over threshold, under threshold. So half sorry for that. That was just my impulse in the moment. So thank you for the caveat. And you looked like you were about to that you wanted to say something, but
Oh, yeah, I was also gonna, but if you were going in a
yeah,
direction, I'll let you go there.
it's I'm interested in what you have to say. I do have
Okay,
stuff. I'm interested in what you
yeah.
have to do.
Well, so my thought is I think there is some rule of thumb that we can give people though, right? That and I witnessed this. So I just co-led a retreat for a week, right? And there are people who habitually, like in your example, will not let themselves cry, say, and they and will or feel like that they can't, like their system doesn't allow that to happen, even if they wanted to, right? And so they will have a tendency to like over inhibit, and there it is possible to let oneself know it's okay. It's okay to let go at different times. It's okay to not, have to keep so much control over my experiences in life. It's okay to see if I can be willing to experiment with this weird thing that's happening and kind of go with it instead of trying to make it not happen. So I think there are ways that we can take the brakes off. Like you even contemplating, do I share that I'm in a bad mood? Do I not share that I'm a bad mood? In general, that's to me a worthwhile question for oneself to be asking of, oh, is it appropriate in the sense of, is it going to be helpful for the conversation between, Rena and I, or is it going to be, is it not going to be helpful in some way, right? And you might be right or wrong in how you decide in terms of your own system. That doesn't matter, right? But there's other people who, I have clients that I'm absolutely giving them inputs into their life, like, hey, the next time this happens, let's see if there are other options, largely because if they don't start inhibiting a few things, and usually behaviors, then they just create more unpleasantness for themselves. They create more problems for themselves. And so doing a little bit of inhibitory work can be useful. So I think it's knowing one's pattern, one can begin to experiment with doing something different. Maybe that was a really long way to get to
No,
that sentence.
thank you. Um, One thought I had in preparation for even when we were deciding on this topic a few weeks ago was how important is this concept for living life, inhibition? What is it exactly? How important is it? Do we need to think about it deeply? And um, with that, one of my fundamental to those of you who know my content on YouTube and Substack, you know that I basically say orientation and pleasure are the two things and the two only things in the universe. Orientation and pleasure, orientation and pleasure, orientation and pleasure. Nothing else matters. There are no other words. Even the other words I'm saying in this sentence, they don't exist. The only two words that exist in the universe are orientation and pleasure. Nothing else exists. I don't exist. It's just orientation and pleasure. So, and with that, there are a lot of terms that people regard as very important that I rarely use, like fight, flight, freeze, what's wrong attractor, what's wrong attention, negativity bias, inhibition, um, inhibition being one of them. So I have a certain, I was about to say bias, but it's a conviction that I tend to be biased towards just say orientation and pleasure, Bach. Don't say any other words because you don't want people to think about any other words except for those two. So I would say in living life, it's orientation, pleasure, and then you can get deep into my Substack and YouTube stuff on what those are instead of worrying about what is inhibition. Am I inhibiting too much, too little? So that's one thing I thought I had. But that said, I'm still interested in this topic, and I had some thoughts about inhibition. So moving to a more practical level after my opening of the more clinical context. Um, I think that okay, so when should you inhibit? When should you not inhibit? I would say go with orientation and pleasure. Surprise, surprise. Just feel it out and see what feels better and what doesn't feel better, and then see what promotes orientation, what doesn't promote orientation. And orientation is automatic, effortless connection to the environment through the senses. So again, it's always orientation and pleasure. By the way, I like our repeating things. So we go on for a long time and repeat, but I think it's at least it's helpful for me. So I don't know how it's helpful it is for the viewer, but I like to do it because repetition is good. Um, so more on inhibition. I think one thing organic intelligence would say is, or at least my interpretation, I think mainstream opinion, mainstream advice, like do your deep breathing, imagine yourself on the beach and do your take a walk and self affirmations and give yourself hugs and a lot of the mainstream advice keeps intensity. Okay, sorry. Okay, from an organic intelligence perspective, from my interpretation, a lot of mainstream advice about living focuses on lowering intensity, on inhibition. The goal is to be peaceful, calm. They use the word parasympathetic a lot, relaxed, rest and digest. What to get, you should get away from excitation and stress and anger and activation, and you should go for calm, pond, meditation, peace, drink your tea, have tea. Everything is chill, calm, 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 inhibit. And that's the goal of the deep breathing and the take a walk and self affirmations. From an organic intelligence perspective, that is leading towards way too much inhibition because you also need to get excited in order to reach organic intensity thresholds. So that's one point, that mainstream is too much into the ideal is relaxation and de-stress. And at the same time, from an organic intelligence perspective, the mainstream also keeps intensity jacked up because of its goal-directed focus on relaxation. So do your deep breathing, do your exercise, do your 8 through 10 self-care strategies to downregulate, to relax. But the fact of being told to keep doing these things to relax, that keeps the intensity jacked up. So at the same time, the mainstream view is overly focused on relaxation and overly focused on excitation in all the wrong ways. That was an exaggeration, but I don't have the brain power to suss that out right now. But it keeps intensity too high when it shouldn't be. It keeps intensity high when it shouldn't be. It keeps intensity low when it shouldn't be. So that's mainstream opinion, and that's why there are only two things that exist, which are orientation and pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how much of that.
No, I appreciate what you're saying there, right? Because you're showing the conflict, the inner conflict that people get into, which is so often I see, and I see this more with many of us who are really decently functioning humans. We're doing things and we're trying to become better people. So you're talking about the kind of the self-help world of things. And so there's a lot of people who are doing just what you described, trying to effort themselves into being a better human being. And very often we talk in organic intelligence how we want people to disinhibit all of the efforting. And so maybe that's kind of one of the key points is disinhibiting all the efforting, because that efforting is keeping you from being able to hit that organic intensity threshold. And it's like you said, there's this tendency to try to keep suppressing certain things that are popping up. And one of the things that we want to have happen is for things to come up and out as they are happening in the system so you can get feedback back into your system. So often we're trying to, and I would say this goes even further, where people are deeply encouraged to keep inhibiting, don't say this, don't say that, make sure you say this and this way, like trying to keep everything safe and copacetic. And we have way more rules now than we've ever had on that. It feels to me, maybe that's not accurate from a cultural standpoint. But that over attempt at inhibiting what you say, what you do, because it might hurt somebody, offend somebody, whatever, we actually want some of that stuff to come out. Because only then could you then have the feedback into your system about, oh, how was that responded to? And so often it ends up being responded to really well. So I'll give an example from the retreat where a person was like, hey, I don't want to interrupt the flow. There's a flow happening. I don't want to interrupt the flow. I don't want to interrupt the program. This usually is common at the beginning. And yet I have this, I'm aware of this happening inside of me. And invariably, unless the person has done this every couple minutes, every single day, through every activity, I'm going to go, let's disinhibit that and let that come to the surface because very often what they're trying to inhibit is just not true. Like they have a feeling that they're being offensive or they're being hurtful or they're being disruptive or what they're sensing, and the reality is like no, they just brought up something that was really valuable for them but also valuable for the whole group, and we want that disinhibition so that they can get more accurate feedback into themselves because very often our own feedback from ourselves is circular conditioning stuff, and we think we shouldn't say something, or we shouldn't think we shouldn't do something, and then it turns out the exact right thing to do if the environment allows us to disinhibit.
Yeah, I want to ask you what you mean by inhibit and disinhibit there. But I also want to say why I'm asking, because I'm not trying to be academic and technical and not helpful to real living, but at the same time, since I also want to make sure that I try to understand organic intelligence and present organic intelligence and be clear about what is organic intelligence and what is not. So I think officially inhibition in the context of organic intelligence refers primarily, most technically and accurately, to inhibition of intensity.
Right.
And at the same time, it is sometimes used to refer to not doing what you want to do, which is sometimes how Steve used it and other people use it. So I'm just, when you say, and I'm with you, like the example you give is a very garden case. Like I want to say something, speak up, but I'm going to inhibit. And then should I disinhibit or inhibit? But what does inhibit and disinhibit mean there? And my goal is to get accurate so that we make sure it's clear the relation between to inhibition of intensity, which is the primary meaning in organic intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that in this case, like in the case of a person saying, "Hey, I don't want to I don't want to interrupt the flow of the group."
Yeah.
But in this case, the person was feeling some level of intensity. And that's why they wanted to share something because they're feeling some level of intensity and it's rising. And if they don't share, what would likely happen is their system would actually go way over their organic threshold because they would keep it internal. And then that would just bump the intensity up in their system.
May I interrupt?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, yes, I had that thought too. So thank you. So in this case, and I feel self-conscious that I tend towards technicalities, but I'm really trying to make sure I present what I think is accurate and true about organic intelligence because but um I gotta stop apologizing for myself, man. So is inhibition, right? What is inhibition? Okay. Um in that case, as you were using inhibition, it actually increases intensity, which is actually the exact opposite of the meaning of inhibition as meaning inhibit intensity. I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying, I'm just noting that as you use inhibition, it means the inhibitor is jacking up his intensity and the
Right.
disinhibitor is lowering his intensity, which is a different, wildly, notably diametrically opposite meaning to inhibition as lowering your intensity and increasing your, I'm just noting that.
Right.
So
Right.
I think for to the extent one wants to really understand, get precise and be consistent and not cause confusion, I think is right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I so and in a so part of the reason we use the phrase in organic intelligence too much inhibition is that the system is not allowing itself to go high enough in its intensity to be able to hit the organic intensity threshold so that the system then can come down. So in that case, it is this idea of sometimes inhibition doesn't allow the intensity to rise sufficiently. And that person, I'm not saying was consciously aware that they were feeling that intensity. I, as a person outside of them, was noting that that intensity was increasing, and I wanted to support that intensity increasing. So, in other words, I wanted that person to disinhibit so that the system could hit its organic intensity threshold, which is different than what that person may or may not have been feeling. So from an outsider perspective, um, because there's a lot more that might be going on the inside of that person, but from an outsider's perspective, this was an example of too much inhibition that would not allow the person to hit their organic intensity threshold, which when I took the brakes off and said, no, go ahead, let yourself share that. Once that inhibition was taken off in terms of this other definition, then
Yeah.
the person hit their threshold. There was a reorganization, a re-understanding, and then the system could come down.
Okay, thank you. I think in your example, the person was inhibiting. By inhibition is he was trying to keep his intensity down, and you wanted him to not do. You were wanting him to not do that, which means to let go. The intensity increases so that it can reach a threshold, and then deactivate, and then intensity goes down. So in that case, disinhibition would mean intensity increases. I'm with you. There are other cases in which speaking up or letting your internal experience fly out directly lowers intensity, so which is a form of inhibition. God, oh my God. For example, social situation, here's a guy. He needs to keep talking and needs other people to keep talking, or else he feels uncomfortable. If it gets too silent, he feels uncomfortable. So he got to and if necessary, he'll just cause drama just so he feels more comfortable. So he'll just keep talking loudly. But that would be inhibition in the sense of lowering intensity, because that's what he's doing to lower his intensity, to keep the party going and the talking going and the laughing and drama going. So I have a sense that this is getting really technical, but I don't know how fruitful that is. But um, oh, there's a real question of when someone says inhibit or disinhibit, what exactly do they mean? And in inorganic intelligence, the primary meaning is lower intensity, directly lower intensity. If the intensity is going to lower because you jack up intensity first, that would be, I think, disinhibition. You want to confront someone and say, I think what you're saying is wrong. I think you're being inappropriate. So the inhibitor needs to disinhibit so the intensity goes up, and then it will decelerate. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a. Did you have something that you wanted to?
Well, I was going to say again, what makes this confusing is our conditioning around inhibiting or not inhibiting is may have nothing to do with what your biology wants. And so as listeners, and again, to your point, is this really helpful for people? I don't know. Because as listeners, in some ways, I want people not to be thinking about inhibition or not inhibiting, other than, social situations where it might be culturally inappropriate to do something. But by and large, I don't want people trying to figure out, are they inhibiting too much? Are they not inhibiting too much? Like all of that mental machinations, I don't want people engaged in. As you mentioned, I want people to be, doing orientation and letting themselves be oriented and orienting to pleasure or just seeking after pleasure, and that is going to be sufficient. That will help your biology find its own organic thresholds, and you don't have to do all that work of trying to figure it out yourself.
No, thank you. I realize we're running out of time. So thank you. Yes, I also have that thought about how much focus I want to put on inhibition and that concept, but that's the topic of our current, which I value. So yes, thank you for getting near my idea that there are only two words in existence: orientation and pleasure. And I would add a third, which is what is the best thing for your well-being to do. So that would be the focus. So like, I want to send an aggressive email to so and so. The question is, what's the best thing to do for my long-term happiness? I don't have to worry about, am I inhibiting? Am I disinhibiting? It's just, should I do this? Is this, then that you get more to like real life. Like, okay, should you do this? Is this in my self-interest? And orientation and pleasure are the two things that organic intelligence offers as the compass towards getting in that direction. Maybe you'll find I'm addressing any particular viewer or listener right now, maybe you'll find that concept of inhibition, disinhibition helps you in some sense. Maybe you're even inhibiting your sexuality or inhibiting your voice or inhibiting your emotions. And you find that the word and concept inhibit and disinhibit are helpful to you, then go with that. At the same time, big picture, orientation, and pleasure for the sake of your long-term self-interest.
Works for me.
Okay. Works for me too. Thank you very much. And to learn more about either of us and the coaching we offer, there will be links in the description. To learn more about organic intelligence, you can read my writing on Substack, link in the description, and explore my video library on YouTube, including the short videos. I meticulously craft my Substack posts and YouTube videos to present substantive content that's direct, clear, and concise. Thank you as usual, Rena. I look forward to next